Today, we're going to look at what scientists have worked out to be the very limits of our survival. How hot or cold can we go? Is the survival rule of 3 true? What's the longest we can live? If you think you know your breaking point, think again. However, we do not encourage anyone to attempt to match or beat these limits.
I'm Stu, this is Debunked, where we sort the truths from the myths and the facts from the misconceptions. Let's start all the way down at the bottom of the scale.
How cold can we go?
This is all down to our core temperature. Unfortunately, the human race isn't built for the cold. Having evolved in the hot climates of the African savanna, our bodies are designed to displace heat rather than retain it. So take away our cozy fires and thermal underwear, and what temperatures can we handle at the lower end of the gauge? Survival here is about protecting your core temperature. This usually sits at around 37 degrees Celsius, but when your body is cold and loses heat faster than it can make it, then your core temperature can start to reduce. If it drops as little as 2 degrees Celsius, then hypothermia will set in. This sequence of events usually follows. At 35 degrees Celsius, you will experience shivering and pale skin as your blood is diverted from your extremities. At 30 degrees Celsius, you'll fall unconscious. At 25 degrees Celsius, you'll go into cardiac arrest. By 24 degrees Celsius, you'll most likely be dead.
As with many of the body's limitations, however, there are exceptions to the rule, with some survivors going far beyond the norm. And this survival story changed medical history.
While skiing, Anna Baggenholm fell through a sheet of ice and was dragged underneath by a mountain stream. She became trapped under 8 inches of ice for around 80 minutes, causing her core temperature to plummet all the way down to 13.7 degrees Celsius. Inevitably, Baggenholm experienced cardiac arrest, but she didn't die. Before the freezing temperature stopped her heart, the constant flow of ice water had already chilled the vital organs and specifically her brain to such an extent that the oxygen demand was significantly reduced, meaning they needed very little O2 to survive. Although Baggenholm was clinically dead for more than 2 hours, the low temperature preserved her brain and vital organs before her heart stopped beating, and so delayed her cells from dying. And incredibly, this allowed medical staff to revive her. Not only did Baggenholm go on to recover, but the results of her survival story went on to change medical practices and introduce the use of therapeutic hypothermia, where the body is cooled down to a mild hypothermia as a technique to protect patients during open heart surgery, as well as victims of strokes, liver failure, and epileptic seizures. 13.7 degrees Celsius remains the coldest anyone has ever been and survived.
Though not quite to that extent, but a reduced temperature is exactly the condition you need for our next question.
How long can we hold our breath?
Most people find it tough to hold their breath for more than a minute, but as a rule of thumb, the limit for the majority of us will be around 3 minutes. Much more than this, and you're dicing with danger. However, there is a specific technique that trained freedivers employ called static apnea, whereby you hold your breath face down in chilled water without moving. This method was employed by the current world record holder, Stephen Misford, achieving an impressive 11 minutes and 35 seconds. But this has since been superseded by a confirmed but unofficial record of 11 minutes and 54 seconds by Branko Petrovic. So, what's the science behind this technique? Termed the mammalian diving reflex, when you submerge your face in cold water, outer blood vessels constrict. Blood is directed away from your extremities and toward your heart and brain. This reduces your heart rate and the rate at which oxygen is pumped around your body. In addition to this, trained breath holders, as they are called, hyperventilate prior to holding their breath. This is because your brain monitors the level of carbon dioxide in your blood. Rapid breathing purges your body of CO2 and delays your reflexive response to take a big gulp of air.
So is Petrovic's 11 minutes 54 seconds the limit of what the human body can be pushed to?
Physiologist Johan Anderson thinks not.
Elite breath hold divers expect the limit to be extended to about 15 minutes before record setting will level off.
Interestingly, you can nearly double your time by taking a breath of pure oxygen before, a record held by Alex Segura when he hit 24 minutes and 3 seconds in 2016.
But going back to temperatures,
How much heat can we handle?
In comparison to the cold, humans, having evolved in them, are pretty well adapted to surviving hot climates, with insane feats like the Badwater Ultramarathon taking place every year. This 135-mile, 217-kilometer race takes place in California's Death Valley, in temperatures of 53 degrees Celsius, 127.4 Fahrenheit. That's only just shy of the hottest temperature ever recorded on Earth, in the same place. The amount of external heat you can endure very much depends on your individual physiology, exertion, and hydration, among other factors. But ultimately, the general consensus is that a very humid 60 degrees Celsius, 140 degrees Fahrenheit, is the limit of our survival. The humidity plays a part as it slows or stops your sweat from evaporating away, making you even hotter. Within 10 minutes of being in this environment, your core temperature could be raised to 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, or above, resulting in severe hypothermia. Your organs will start to shut down, and if untreated, you'll be dead. However, the highest recorded core temperature was that of Willie Jones, who was admitted to hospital during an Atlanta heatwave, with a body temperature of 46.5 degrees Celsius, 115.7 degrees Fahrenheit. He spent 24 days in hospital, and incredibly, he survived.
the environmental temperature dictates the answer to our next question.
How long can we go without water?
This varies dramatically depending on the scenario we put ourselves in. If we were doing some pretty strenuous exercise on a very hot and sunny day, then you could be losing 1.5 litres of water each hour. If you don't rehydrate, your blood volume decreases and in turn your blood pressure drops. Your blood then becomes thicker and stickier and will be harder to pump around your body. Your heart rate then has to increase to compensate. You'll actually stop sweating, making you even hotter while you continue to dehydrate. This scenario would see you dead within a few hours. Alternatively, in a cool environment with very little exertion, you could last around a week. But as a general rule of thumb, under more normal circumstances, a person could survive 3 to 4 days without water.
You can go 100 hours without drinking at an average temperature outdoors. If it's cooler, you can go a little longer. If you are exposed to direct sunlight, it's less.
Andreas Mijovic, however, beat this life expectancy by quite a stretch, when he was mistakenly locked in a police cell and forgotten about for 18 days. Although there is some controversy around this record, as it's alleged he survived by licking condensation off the cell walls.
Surviving without food, on the other hand, is quite a different matter.
How long can we go without food?
In this scenario, it actually helps to be obese in the first place. A study published in 1973 at the University Department of Medicine in Dundee recounts the case of Angus Barbieri, who weighed 456 pounds. Barbieri was monitored as he fasted all the way down to 180 pounds for an incredible 382 days. Under medical supervision, Barbieri had consumed only 0-calorie drinks and vitamins for the duration of the fast. But being fat only helps you survive for such a long time without eating if you have access to enough vital water-soluble B vitamins, which help metabolize your fat stores. Without these, your survival rate would be considerably shorter, and it would be perfectly possible for someone to die of starvation and still be fat. Gandhi's 21-day fast is often cited as the standard limit for human survival. He survived only by taking sips of water. Other cases of food starvation, whilst receiving adequate hydration, have recorded individuals surviving between 46 and 73 days. These, among other cases, were taken into account when the British Medical Journal reviewed human starvation in 1997. They surmised that the survival time for a well-hydrated individual is 30 to 40 days. with severe, possibly irreversible symptoms kicking in between 35 and 40 days, and death occurring from 45 days onward. Essentially, the amount of time someone can survive is affected by factors like body weight and composition, genetic variation, other health considerations, and the presence or absence of hydration.
But no matter how much we eat or drink, we can't keep going without rest.
How long can we go without sleep?
Sleep seems to have lost its value in today's overworked and overstimulated world. But when the sleep debt becomes too great, it can be dangerous.
When sleep deprivation becomes great enough, the effects mimic those of psychosis. The failure of the scientific world to recognize this is due to some extent to the folklore that has grown up around the sleepless marathon of high school student Randy Gardner in 1964.
Randy Gardner got himself into the Guinness World Records by staying awake for an incredible 264 hours. That's 11 days. The reports of the feat mainly surmised that Gardner's mental health remained stable throughout the challenge, enough to even beat someone at a game of pinball on day 10. However, Lieutenant Commander Ross from the US Navy Medical Neuropsychiatric Research Unit monitored Gardner throughout the challenge, and his report tells quite a different story.
A delusional episode, increased memory lapses, fragmented thinking, paranoia. His mental abilities were diminished.
These patterns are similar to those experienced by others who have taken part in sleepless marathons and studies, concluding that prolonged amounts of sleeplessness will lead to serious mental symptoms. In fact, Guinness World Records no longer lists voluntary sleep deprivation as a record, so as not to encourage any further attempts. But there have still been recorded challenges to this title, with the longest stint hitting a whopping 449 hours. That's nearly 19 days. Whilst Gardner was observed to have made a full recovery after his time awake, sleep deprivation will eventually be fatal. While there are no recorded instances of people being forced to stay awake long enough to kill them, there is a disease called fatal familiar insomnia which completely stops you sleeping and appears to be the ultimate limit, with victims dying within 3 months.
As we're investigating survival, it only makes sense to find out the maximum human lifespan.
How old can we get?
The limit to how long humans can live is a controversial one, with many credible studies contradicting each other.
Some scientists believe that there is a finite age, one that humans cannot age beyond. Having trawled through the international database on longevity to identify trends, expert on aging Dr. Jan Vijk claims that after decades of significant increases in human longevity, the maximum age slowed in the 1980s and has now stopped, with the upper age limit being 115 years old. Dr. Vijk's team admit there will be the occasional anomaly, but
You'd need 10,000 worlds like ours to have the chance that there would be one human who would become 125 years old.
When this finite age was published, it sparked fierce debate among the scientific community. A more recent study found that so long as you reach 105 years of age, then the risk of dying plateaus. What does this mean? Well, let's rewind the clock to someone who is 50. At this age, they are 3 times more likely to die within the next year than someone who is 30, aging to 31. By comparison, someone who has managed to live all the way to 105 is just as likely to live to 106 as someone who is 120 living to 121. Their chances of dying no longer go up. Also, statistically, the number of people who are now hitting 105 years old is on the increase. Co-author of the study, Professor of Demography and Statistics, Kenneth Watcher believes,
That's strong evidence that if there is a maximum limit to human lifespan, we are not close to it yet.
But far from a standard human trait, it has been suggested that this plateau may instead be due to a survival of the fittest type consequence, leaving the toughest to live through their hundreds. And the toughest nut of them all was Jeanne Calment from France, who set the record for human longevity in 1997, when she hit the ripe old age of 122.
Stay tuned for a bonus fact about survival after death.
But first, thanks to our audience for their survival limit suggestions. And thanks to Raycon Earbuds, who have actually made this video possible. If you enjoy our videos or listen to podcasts, music or audiobooks on the go and want great sound quality and the freedom of true wireless, then Raycon's earbuds are the perfect option for high quality audio that won't break the bank. They're about half the price of other top audio brands and sound just as amazing. Plus, follow our link buyraycon.com/debunked and you'll get 15% off your order too. We use our everyday E25s when writing scripts, illustrating and animating, as well as while we're out and about, as they come with a nifty little carry case that charges them on the go. They really have become a faithful pair of companions. Whilst our first topic saw Bag & Home return from the dead after 2 hours, incredibly, this isn't the longest time recorded between death and resurrection.
What's the longest we can survive after death?
In 2008, it was widely reported that when Velma Thomas suffered a heart attack, doctors tried everything to revive her, even using the techniques learned from Bag & Home's experience by inducing hypothermia. But for 17 hours, no brain activity was detected. According to Velma's son,
her skin had already started hardening. Her hands and toes were curling up. They were already drawn. There was no life there.
With no pulse, blood pressure, or measurable brain activity, the decision was made to take her off life support. But just 10 minutes later, as doctors were removing respiratory tubes, Velma moved her arm, coughed, and then just woke up. Dr. Eggleston, who treated Velma, said,
"There are things that as physicians and nurses we can't always explain, and I think this is one of those cases."
Remember to check out Raycon, as their support means we can keep making videos. Make sure you subscribe and explore our other myths and misconceptions on screen now.